I believe we're ready to proceed. Can I please have the attorneys for each side activate their video? Okay. Is the plaintiff prepared to proceed to trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Is the defense prepared to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Do the judges have copies of the trial rosters?
No. Do I need one?
Emma, do they need a copy of the trial roster?
Yes, if you put your email in the chat, I'll send it to you.
Okay. And the gallery's we've already cleared the gallery, right, Emma? So we don't need to worry about that.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to proceed. I want to remind the teams that no recesses will be allowed, with the exception of those granted for a health emergency, and especially not between the end of witness examination and the beginning of closing arguments. Now, with respect to scoring panelists, we've already addressed whether there is any reason for them to believe they'd be biased. Reminder to the teams that any disputes arising out of this competition must be reported in accordance with the competition rules. The teams you're required to comply with the time requirements, which will be considered in the scoring of individual performances. Got that. At this time, I would like to ask the plaintiff side to please introduce their team members, both the attorneys and the witnesses.
Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, my name is Isabel Carlton, and today I will be delivering the opening statement, the direct examination of Dr. Casey Rogers, and the cross-examination of Skylar Weirs.
Thank you.
Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, my name is Jada Ninks, and I will be delivering the direct examination of Carson Durst, as well as the cross-examination of Blake Doncourt.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. My name is Will Damon, and I will be delivering the direct examination of Dakota Weirs, the cross-examination of Dr. Devin Williams, as well as our closing argument. Your Honor, at this time, our witnesses would like to introduce themselves.
Your Honor, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, my name is Vi Wing, and I am Dakota Weirs.
Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, my name is Kaylor Regath, and I am Dr. Casey Rogers.
Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, I am Mary Oswald, and I am Carson Durst.
Okay, and for the defense?
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Miss Mary Walker. I use she, her pronouns, and today I will be conducting the direct examination of Miss Skylar Weirs and the cross-examination of Mr. Carson Durst. Permission for my co-counsel to introduce themselves?
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Miss Helen Blake. I use she, her pronouns, and today I will be conducting the direct examination of Dr. Devin Williams, the cross-examination of Dr. Casey Rogers, and conducting the closing argument.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Miss Abigail Shapiro. I use she, her pronouns, and today I will be delivering the opening statement as well as conducting the direct examination of Blake Doncourt and the cross-examination of Dakota Weirs. Permission for our witnesses to introduce themselves?
Sure, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Miss Wynn Sharp. I use she, her pronouns, and today I am Blake Doncourt.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of opposing counsel and the jury. My name is Miss Morgan Romine. I use she, her pronouns, and today I am Skylar Weirs.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Audrey Gordon. I use she, her pronouns, and I am Devin Williams.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to ask we're going to swear in the team members. If the team members can please raise your right hands and activate your video. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? Okay, thank you. Witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial? Okay, thank you. We don't have any gallery members here, so I'm going to skip the gallery member swearing in. Scoring panelists, please raise your right hand. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, let's proceed. Plaintiff's counsel, how would you like to proceed? For opening statement?
Your Honor, we have some preliminary matters we'd like to address.
Okay.
On behalf of both teams, let the record reflect that one of my team members will be posting the appropriate trial rosters for competition in the Zoom chat for the purpose of exchanging rosters as a preliminary matter.
Okay. Permission granted.
Also, let the record reflect that both teams have agreed to the stipulated facts and jury instructions for this case and will also be entered into this chat for yourself and for the jury to be considered constructively read into the record.
Granted.
Your Honor, we request the court's preference on recross examinations.
Recross will only permit it if redirect is permitted. Subject to the time, and it's all subject to the time requirements of the competition.
Yes, Your Honor. We also ask that pursuant to competition rule 7.4, that when an exhibit is shown to a witness, a member of the examining attorney's team will be able to pull that exhibit utilizing the Zoom screen sharing function. Additionally, all exhibits or other documents posted in this manner are deemed to not have been shown to the jury unless the counselor asks for them to be published.
Okay, permitted, granted.
Also, according to Rule 4.7, no additional edits are to be made to the documents, including markings and enlargements outside of today's trial, and only will be allowed if edits were made in today's trial utilizing the Zoom annotation tools. In addition to Rule 7.4, we can utilize Zoom annotation tools to enlarge documents during the trial.
Granted.
Additionally, we ask that all evidence deemed to have been constructively handed to opposing counsel for their review.
Granted.
Your Honor, if at any point in the trial the court cannot hear or see the witness or attorney, please feel free to interrupt us at any point.
Don't worry about that.
And we ask that our timekeepers be allowed to post time remaining publicly within the Zoom chat feature throughout this trial to ensure that we meet time demands, as this is a time trial.
Yes, that's something I wanted. Ms. Baxter, are you able to grant the timekeepers co-host provision so they can so they have the ability to show that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, can you please do that?
Thank you, Your
Yes.
Honor. And as the plaintiff, we ask that all time remaining on closing argument be reserved for rebuttal at the end of the trial.
I would prefer that you reserve the time, you state a time that you propose to reserve at the end of your closing argument, so we know what that is, the beginning of the closing argument.
Yeah. That is all. No further preliminary matters to attend to.
Thank you. Are there any preliminary matters from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, we have a few preliminary. First, Your Honor, we ask that the crossing attorney keep their camera on throughout the entire direct examination of their witness.
Yeah, I'm going to ask that in when a witness is testifying, the directing attorney needs to leave their video on the entire time. The cross-examining attorney needs to leave their video on while that witness is testifying, as well as through the entire witness's testimony. The witness needs to leave their video and audio on throughout their testimony. So both sides attorneys need to keep their video active for the witnesses they will be examining.
Your Honor. And second, we ask that for technical difficulties, including the process of screen sharing, that time be paused for both sides.
If it exceeds 15 seconds to do it, we'll pause it. But if it's a minimal amount of time, then we're not going to extend the time for that.
Yes, Your Honor. And finally, given the fact that we are conducting this trial virtually, we ask for the option to remain seated for openings and closing statements.
Certainly. You can remain seated throughout the proceeding.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further preliminary matters.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Carlton, are you delivering the opening for the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Are you prepared to proceed?
Yes, I just need 1 moment so I can get my things on the podium.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Carlton, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you can begin.
Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, prioritized profit produces pain. Succeeding as a corporation in our current economy takes grit and perseverance. Bankruptcy is a persistent threat, whether it's a significant competitor or costly production methods. Making decisions that will benefit the company without cutting corners is not easily done. This turmoil is exemplified by today's case. Since the year 2000, CEO Blake Doncourt has grown the defendant, Lush Fertilizer Incorporated, into one of the world's largest supplier of yard and commercial fertilizers. One of the products that launched their success is Lush Fertilizer, which was made possible through Lush's patented bonding agent, Drufo. This product contained warnings to avoid skin exposure and inhalation, but did not address the rumors surrounding its possible carcinogenic nature or why it had been banned in other countries. The plaintiff, Dakota Weirs, started working as a landscaping technician at 14 years old. Since then, she regularly used Lush Fertilizer along with other lawn chemicals. There was a lot to know about Dakota. For example, she was active in school as a part of National Honor Society. She was a volunteer at a homeless shelter, and she was an avid piano player. So much so that she was offered a scholarship at Juilliard. However, all of this swiftly came crashing down when Dakota was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, a cancer affecting the lymph system. Before she even turned 20 years old, Dakota's diagnosis and subsequent symptoms have drastically decreased her quality of life. Prioritized profit produces pain. We, the plaintiffs, are here today to recover some of the profit that produced Dakota's immense pain. First, we will call Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand. She has a PhD in agriculture, a bachelor's in chemistry, and years of experience in studying the effects of prolonged exposure to chemicals. She will testify to the results of her study targeting Drufo, the correlation between non-Hodgkin lymphoma and Drufo, and the causation of Dakota's non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Next, Carson Durst, the former product development engineer for Lush Fertilizer, will confirm the company's knowledge regarding the pain Drufo was producing for the users, the negligence of Lush Fertilizer Incorporated, and an explanation for the company prioritizing profit. Lastly, Dakota Weirs herself will testify to the nature of using Lush Fertilizer at her job, that its ingredients contained Drufo, and the overwhelming physical and mental pain this exposure has caused. The defendant, Lush Fertilizer, will bring forth 3 witnesses: Blake Doncourt, the CEO and decision maker for the defendant; Devin Williams, who leads the toxicology research and development labs for the defendant; and Skylar Weirs, Dakota's twin, who is an investigative journalist in which they spent almost a year researching Drufo for a series of articles on modern agritech. Prioritized profit produces pain. As the plaintiff, we hold the burden of proving that Lush Fertilizer contains the bonding agent Drufo. Lush Fertilizer Incorporated was negligent by failing to exercise reasonable care to prevent the product from creating unreasonable harm. That Dakota Weirs was reasonably expected to use said product, and that Dakota Weirs' damages were caused by the negligence of Lush Fertilizer Incorporated as she used the product in a manner that was reasonably expected. If you find these statements have been proved, then your verdict must be for the plaintiff. As the plaintiff, we must prove the nature and extent of Dakota Weirs' damages. As the jury, if you find in favor of the plaintiff, you must determine the total dollar amount of Dakota Weirs' damages that were caused by the negligence of the defendant, Lush Fertilizer Incorporated. In determining these damages, consider non-economic losses or injuries endured by the plaintiff presently or in the future, as well as any damages caused by the plaintiff's negligence. We, the plaintiffs, hold the burden of proving by the preponderance of the evidence that Lush Fertilizer Incorporated's negligence caused Dakota Weirs non-Hodgkin lymphoma. That means for the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs, to be awarded damages, we must prove that it is more probably true than not Lush Fertilizer Incorporated prioritized profit and produced pain. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Carlton. And Ms. Walker, are you giving the opening for the, oh, it's Ms. Shapiro. Okay, Ms. Shapiro, you prepared?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you can proceed.
Thank you. We are here today because of a terrible tragedy. I, along with my co-counsel and client, offer our deepest sympathies to Dakota Weirs and his family. Ms. Weirs' life has been altered forever, and now she wants answers. We understand. Tragedy often prompts the search for truth, but today, the defense is asking you to separate the truth from the tragedy. And the truth of the matter is that the plaintiff will fail to prove that there is a connection between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. The defense will begin its case by calling Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush Fertilizer Incorporated, to the stand, and you will hear about Lush from her perspective as CEO. Lush is Ms. Doncourt's passion project, a method of working towards a more sustainable planet while keeping consumers safe. Ms. Doncourt focused on what was reasonably foreseeable for her company based on the information that was available to her. You will hear about the exact reasoning behind all of her decisions. Next, the defense will call Skylar Weirs to the stand. Now, testifying against her own twin is not something that Ms. Weirs takes lightly, but as an experienced researcher in agricultural technology, Ms. Weirs will explain the benefits of Drufo, the vital ingredient used in Lush fertilizer. She will tell you that Drufo is proven to be safer than its competitors because it reduces the need to use other fertilizers, resulting in less chemical exposure for both its users and the environment. Ms. Weirs will tell you that there is not a single viable study that links Drufo to non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Now, Lush has incorporated Drufo in its products for years, yet Dakota Weirs is the only person to ever bring a claim of negligence to a court of law. For that matter, no one has ever brought a claim against Drufo to the public domain. This will make you pause and question if there is truly a link of causation between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Finally, the defense will call Dr. Devin Williams to the stand. Dr. Williams leads the toxicology research and development labs for Lush and is also the outgoing chair of the company's ethics committee. She will tell you that the use of Drufo has not been correlated with a significant increase in the incidence of non-Hodgkin lymphoma or any other condition. She will also address a study that the plaintiff will attempt to use to prove causation. Dr. Williams will challenge the veracity of this study because it is vague, not peer-reviewed, and it has never been replicated. The plaintiff claims that Lush was negligent. To be successful in their case, the plaintiff has the burden of proving by a preponderance of the evidence that 1, Lush fertilizer causes non-Hodgkin lymphoma, 2, Lush Fertilizer Incorporated had a duty to warn. 3, there was a breach of that duty. And 4, there are damages as a result of that breach. The plaintiff will call Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand, who will present a study that is simply not reliable. The plaintiff will call Carson Durst to the stand, and she will claim that Lush did not adequately test Drufo, but the defense will expose Ms. Durst's vendetta against Lush Fertilizer and specifically Blake Doncourt. Lastly, the plaintiff will call Dakota Weirs to the stand. Ms. Weirs will claim that there is an insufficient warning on Lush Fertilizer's user recommendation label, but she must also testify to the fact that she did not follow the proper instructions on this label. Members of the jury, the defense does not dispute the fact that Dakota Weirs is suffering from a terrible medical condition. We can all recognize this tragedy. However, the defense will show you that Drufo is both safe and ethical. We will show you that there is no reliable proof of causation in court today, and therefore Lush had no duty to warn consumers and could not breach that duty. If you do, nevertheless, find that Lush Fertilizer is liable, you must also consider Mr. Weirs' comparative negligence under jury instruction number 8. In this trial, you will come to understand that Lush Fertilizer is not the source of Ms. Weirs' illness. This will be enough for you to separate the truth from the tragedy. This will be enough for you to find Lush Fertilizer Incorporated not liable. Thank you.
Thank you. How would the plaintiff like to proceed?
Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to call Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand.
Dr. Rogers? Okay, Ms. Carlton, you can proceed.
Please state your name, spelling your last for the record.
My name is Casey Rogers, last name spelled Rogers.
And what is your occupation?
I'm currently employed as a professor in the Department of Horticulture and Entomology at the University of California at Berkeley.
What is your area of expertise?
I focus on agriculture and chemistry, but specifically pesticide chemistry and toxicology.
As this is your area of expertise, what do you do?
I've been studying the potentially harmful effects prolonged exposure to chemicals has on the body. I'm also currently researching pesticide mode of action and metabolism.
What knowledge do you have in those fields?
I have a PhD in agriculture and a Bachelor of Science in agriculture and chemistry.
What experience do you have in agriculture and chemistry?
Besides my PhD, I worked as a research analyst for a large multinational chemical company.
What did that experience look like?
I made recommendations to companies and regulatory agencies on precautions that should be taken by laborers who are exposed to the chemicals. I've also published numerous articles on the negative and harmful effects prolonged exposure to many different chemicals has, including Drufo.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 702, I move to admit Dr. Casey Rogers is an expert in agriculture, chemistry, and the effects of prolonged exposure to chemicals.
Ms. Blake, any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Then Dr. Rogers will be admitted in those areas.
What is your connection to today's case?
Part of my research in determining the long-term health effects of prolonged exposure to potentially harmful substances included Drufo. I even put together a study that specifically targeted Drufo.
What is Drufo?
Drufo is a patented ingredient that Lush uses in all of its fertilizers as a bonding agent specifically used to keep the fertilizer preserved and intact.
Why did you conduct your study on it?
Although I'm concerned about many agricultural products, Drufo kind of caught my attention when it first came to the market. I wanted to study the chemical to determine any adverse health effects in people exposed to Drufo for prolonged periods of time.
And who did your study include?
My study included a control group of people who had never been exposed to Drufo before, a control group of people who had been exposed to Drufo on an occasion, and a group of people who had been exposed to Drufo on a regular, almost daily basis.
Who were the people that were expected to be exposed to Drufo on a regular basis?
These people were farm laborers who used the fertilizer in the field and gardeners who used the product to maintain a garden.
What did your study do?
The study monitored the groups over a period of years following the exposure. The groups who had been exposed to Drufo were monitored for health conditions, and they were compared to the control group.
What did your study targeting Drufo find?
The study found higher incidences of cancer. People were 10 times more likely to be diagnosed with cancer as those who hadn't been exposed.
In your expert opinion, what do those findings suggest?
These results suggest that there is a correlation between Drufo and cancer, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
What is non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Non-Hodgkin lymphoma is a type of cancer that affects white blood cells. It can start in any area containing lymph tissue and spreads throughout the rest of the body.
How serious is this cancer?
Overall, the 5-year survival rate is 72%. Depending on the stage and type, it can be controlled through treatment, but it can never be cured.
What is the
Objection,
causation?
Your Honor.
What's the objection?
This is outside of the scope of the witness's expertise.
Your Honor, if I may.
Go ahead.
This witness was entered in as an expert in the effects of prolonged exposure to chemicals, and she laid foundation that cancer and non-Hodgkin lymphoma was one of the effects of that.
Overruled.
Would you like me to answer the question?
She's already answered the question.
What is the causation of non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Non-Hodgkin lymphoma is not genetic. It's usually caused by exposure to environmental conditions.
What kind of environmental conditions?
Those that include pesticides.
And what are the symptoms of non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Some symptoms can include night sweats, fever, weight loss, tiredness, loss of appetite, anemia, and an itch all over the body.
And what did you do with the results of your study?
Short of discontinuing Drufo altogether, I made some recommendations for steps that should be taken to reduce exposure and related risks.
What did you define as exposure in your recommendations?
Those exposed to Drufo were exposed by breathing in the aerolized product and also exposed through contact with the skin. Based on my findings, I reviewed options to prevent exposure to this toxic chemical.
What were those recommendations to reduce exposure?
Anybody who worked with Drufo should wear long sleeves and long pants to avoid their skin coming in contact with the chemicals. They should also wear a medical grade protective face mask, which covers the face and nose to prevent breathing in the aerolized product.
How useful were those recommendations?
They actually weren't very useful because they were found inconclusive.
Why is that?
Line protective covers are typically not even provided to workers.
Moving back to today's case, how familiar are you with Dakota Weirs' records?
For this case, I've reviewed her medical records and her employment records.
What did those reveal about Ms. Weirs?
She worked for a landscaping company and used products containing Drufo for prolonged periods of time.
How familiar are you with this nature of chemical exposure?
Very familiar. Weir's level of exposure was similar in nature to those in the study who had prolonged exposure to the chemical. This is also what my many years of education have focused on.
What did Dakota Weirs' medical records confirm?
That she was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
In your expert opinion, what was the causation of her cancer?
There's a high degree of medical probability that Weir's non-Hodgkin lymphoma was caused by prolonged exposure to Drufo.
Objection, Your Honor. This is outside of the scope of the witness's expertise.
Ms. Carlton?
Your Honor, if I may, one of the effects of prolonged exposure to chemicals does have to do with medical probabilities. And it
Response, Your Honor.
Hold on, Ms. Blake. Go ahead, Ms. Carlton.
And it was explained earlier that she found non-Hodgkin lymphoma in the results of her study.
Ms. Blake?
I agree that Dr. Rogers is tended as an expert in the prolonged effects of chemical exposure. However, basing her final opinion on a high degree of medical probability, I would argue, is much more nuanced than simply just a chemical or tendering in prolonged effects of exposure to chemicals. Having a medical degree is much more nuanced and specific than chemicals, and basing her opinion on that medical probability would require a medical degree, which she does not have.
Your Honor, if I may.
That's okay. Objection sustained. She hasn't been qualified as a medical doctor and is not qualified to give a medical opinion. Objection sustained.
Would you like me to reword the question?
If if you'd like to reword the question, you're within your rights to do so.
In your expert opinion, what was the causation of her cancer that is not based on a medical probability?
Whereas non-Hodgkin lymphoma was caused by exposure to prolonged times of Drufo.
In your expert opinion, how could Dakota Weirs have been exposed?
Weirs was exposed to Drufo regularly for nearly 4 years without any use of protective gear.
To be clear, through your study and expertise, what is the correlation between the development of Dakota Weirs non-Hodgkin lymphoma and Drufo?
Particles of Drufo that entered Weir's tissue damaged cells, resulting in cancerous masses. From there, lymphoma of any kind is nearly inevitable.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Ms. Blake Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Rogers.
Good afternoon.
Now, this is your first time testifying as an expert witness. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And you are hoping that it won't be your last?
Yes.
So if this case goes the way you think it should, you assume it will open the door to similar class action lawsuits.
Yes, I do.
And you would be on the forefront of that battle.
Correct.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. I'd like to discuss your study. First of all, you claim that there were not sufficient studies conducted on Drufo safety.
No, there were not.
And yet you were not involved in the development of Drufo?
No.
Nor were you involved in the testing of Drufo?
Correct.
And so you took it upon yourself to research Drufo?
Yes, I did.
And you also note that you had been hearing reports on the potentially negative effects of Drufo?
Correct.
And yet nowhere in your witness statement do you note where you had heard those reports?
No.
Nowhere in your witness statement do you mention who had written those reports?
No, I do not.
Nowhere in your witness statement do you note when those reports were published?
Objection, Honor, relevance.
Overruled.
And so, Dr. Rogers, you conducted your own study on Drufo.
Yes, I did.
And so you followed persons who were exposed to Drufo over long periods of time. Is that correct?
Yes.
And yet nowhere in your witness statement do you specify how long periods of time is?
No.
Nowhere in your witness statement do you detail how large the groups of people were that you studied?
No, I do not.
And nowhere do you quantify occasional exposure?
Correct.
And so you only chose to share your conclusion of this study.
Yes, I did.
And I'd like to talk about that. You come to the ultimate conclusion that Dakota Weirs' non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was caused by Drufo.
Yes, it was.
And you came to this on a high degree of medical probability.
I did.
I'd like to switch gears a little bit. As a scientist, would you agree that whether or not your study has been peer-reviewed is relevant information?
Can you repeat that?
Yes, I can. As a scientist, would you agree that whether or not your study has been peer-reviewed is relevant information?
Yes.
As a scientist, would you agree that whether or not your study has been replicated is relevant information?
Yes.
And isn't it correct that you signed your witness statement today?
It is.
And you agreed that your witness statement includes everything you know of that could be relevant to these events?
Correct.
And that you would update your statement as necessary?
Yes, I would.
And yet nowhere in your witness statement do you detail whether your study has been replicated?
No, I do not.
Nowhere in your witness statement do you detail whether your study has been peer-reviewed?
No.
Thank you. I'd like to take a step back and look at some technicalities. As part of your study, you also examined ways to mitigate and prevent exposure to Drufo.
Yes, I did.
And you found that overall,
those exposed to Drufo were primarily exposed by breathing in the aerosolized product.
as well as coming in contact with their skin.
Of course. And in order to reduce risks of absorption, a user can wear long pants, for example.
Yes.
They can wear long sleeves.
Yes.
And they can wear a medical grade protective face mask.
Correct.
And you mentioned that you had looked over Dakota Weirs's medical statements and employment records, correct?
Yes, I did.
And so isn't it correct that Dakota Weirs took none of those preventative measures?
No, she did not, because these protective clothing and gears were not even provided to workers.
Dr. Rogers, that wasn't my question. Dakota Weirs took none of those preventative measures, yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Ms. Carlton, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, proceed.
Why did you decide to conduct a study on Drufo?
I decided to conduct this study because I believe there wasn't sufficient studies in its safety, so I conducted my own.
And how confident are you in your results?
I am pretty confident.
And why were your recommendations to wear face coverings and protective clothing insufficient?
Because they weren't even provided to the workers.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Blake, any recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rogers. You're excused from the witness stand. And who would be the next witness for the plaintiff?
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Carson Durst to the stand.
Ms. Durst? Can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you can proceed, Ms. Hinks.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name and spell it for the record. My name is Carson Durst, D-U-R-S-T. And Ms. Durst, what is your occupation? I currently work at Terrace Greenery, but I used to work for Lush Fertilizer. Lush Fertilizer and Terrace Greenery are competitors. And what does Terrace Greenery do? Terrace Greenery is a fertilizer manufacturer that produces products similar to Lush's products. I'm the lead product developer at Terrace Greenery. I'd like to now go back and kind of talk about your time working at Lush. What kind of work did you do for Lush? I worked on the research and development team. We analyzed the research specific to the use of Drufo found in Lush's products. And could you specifically tell me about the work that you did with Drufo? My job specifically was the analysis and composition of the chemicals that make up Drufo. Drufo is a bonding agent designed by Lush to keep its fertilizers preserved and intact. And what did you find in that research? While researching, I found a specific study from England that concluded that the chemical compound was carcinogenic in rats, but no evidence has been found related to the impact on humans yet. And what was the impact of this research? Others on the research team and myself composed a second study to determine if Drufo could potentially be carcinogenic in humans. And what happened after that study was conducted? Well, first, I brought my concerns to the supervisor, Jerry Langley, and she later organized a meeting to evaluate our findings. And besides Jerry Langley, who else was present? I was there, Jerry Langley, Alex Monroe, who's an upper echelon manager, as well as the rest of the research team. And were all of these people current employees at Lush? Yes, they were employees at the time. And in this meeting, what was discussed? One of the scientists expressed her concern of a finding in the study that Drufo may contain a carcinogen that is linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Objection, Your Honor, this is hearsay.
Thanks.
Your Honor, as pursuant to Rule 801D2, this is a statement made by the party opponent, Lush Fertilizer, in a meeting for Lush Fertilizer, and therefore is definitionally not hearsay.
Response, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, co-counsel has laid foundation as to what employees were in the meeting. They did not lay foundation as if the scientists were employees of Lush Fertilizer. They just said that scientists expressed concern and did not allude to if the scientists were employees of Lush Fertilizer.
Your Honor, if I may.
Go ahead.
I had just previously asked the question, and were all of the people in the meeting current employees at Lush Fertilizer? I clarified that, laid that foundation for the jury, therefore proving that this was a Lush meeting for the company by Lush employees as well, and that Carson Durst at the time was a Lush employee, Jerry Langley was a Lush employee, and so were the group of scientists.
Objections overruled.
Ms. Durst, and what was discussed in this meeting?
One of the scientists expressed their concern of a finding in the study that Drufo may contain a carcinogen that is linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
And how is this concern addressed?
It was brushed under the rug. It was requested that we drop all the matter after the meeting.
And what happened with those findings after the meeting?
Well, about a month later, I got a personal copy of the report. After reading it, I was highly concerned.
What concerned you, Ms. Durst?
The study concluded that our statistics and our distribution is lower than what is required by the law, and that we need to conduct further research into the chemical composition of Drufo to draw any further conclusions.
Objection.
What's the objection?
Best evidence. This is not an evidence.
Ms. Inks?
Your Honor, I believe that my witness is testifying to testifying to her experience as an employee at Lush Fertilizer. She's not testifying to necessarily any evidence within the case, but necessarily her time working and what she experienced as an employee.
Well, isn't she quoting from a report or paraphrasing a report?
She, as that was part of her work that she did, she's not quoting direct statistics, but rather just giving a brief overview. We don't intend to talk about in further questioning direct numbers or any evidence that has not been provided for the court today.
I think the objection. I think the objection is sustained. I think that's hearsay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Okay, and Ms. Durst, based off of the meeting and what you guys discussed, the evidence that you did indeed have, what did the report recommend that Lush do next?
The report recommended to that ensure there's no risk of any carcinogen.
I re-raise my objection. This report is not in evidence.
Ms. Inks?
Your Honor, a brief moment to confer with co-counsel.
Okay.
Your Honor, my witness is not testifying to the contents therein of the report as to whether, but is rather testifying to the company and what the company did with the report. We're not talking about the specific findings that have occurred within the court. We're therefore talking about the company and its overall and its ongoings with what happened in regards to the report. As a scientist at Lush Fertilizer, this is my witness's day-to-day job. This is what they do. They're not testifying though as to whether the specific details, but to rather like what was going on.
Well, the question, if I'm not mistaken, the question was, what did the report recommend? Which is asking her to tell us what was in the report.
I was referencing the company in regards to what did Lush do? Like what did Lush do?
The objection is sustained, but you can rephrase your question.
Ms. Durst, based off of what did the company do next?
Well, they didn't take the precautions in to bake the products, so they honestly did nothing.
I re-raise my objection, Your Honor. There is not evidence that shows to bake the products, and this evidence is not, this study is not an evidence.
Overruled.
And Ms. Durst, what was Lush's response, the company to the what was the company's response to the recommendation that Drufo be baked?
Well, honestly, nothing.
What do you mean by nothing?
Lush Fertilizer, as far as I can tell, did not respond to this, and in my opinion, prioritized profit over the potential pain that would come from not baking the chemical. And here we are today. The company made it seem like this process would be going above and beyond necessary standards, but truly, this wasn't the case.
And why wasn't any action being taken by the company?
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
Overruled.
Drufo was Lush's big money-making product. Drufo was what made Lush stand apart and guarantee the company financial success. By ignoring the potential risk, Lush knew about the potential pain and still prioritized profit.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Okay, Ms. Walker, cross.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Ms. Durst. I would like to talk a little bit about your relationship with Blake Duncourt. Now, you were close with the CEO of Lush Fertilizer, Blake Duncourt, correct?
Well, yes, for a long time.
And you say they were like the family you never had.
Yes, they were.
You were best friends with her son.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Walker.
Your Honor, I'm simply laying foundation as to Ms. Durst's relationship within the company.
Okay. Just overruled. You can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Charles, Ms. Duncourt's son, got you an internship at Lush, correct?
Yes, he did, but also I was going to school for that.
Right. So with this new job, you were tasked with researching the safety of Drufo, correct?
Yes, I was.
Specifically, you were tasked with researching a chemical compound, C3NO9P, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Now, Ms. Durst, if you could help me understand and the jury understand, what does C3NO9P stand for?
I don't think that is in the scope of my affidavit directly.
That's okay, Ms. Durst, I'll move on. And you found a study that support this evidence that this chemical, C3NO9P, might be carcinogenic, correct?
Yes.
Ms. Durst, this study was done on rats.
Yes, it was, but then we proceeded to conduct a second study to see if it was carcinogenic in humans. We were just using this as a starting point.
Ms. Durst, did you find any other studies that supported this theory that this chemical compound is 100% carcinogenic in humans?
No, we have not. We did not.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. And while working at Lush, despite this one article you found on rats, you rose quickly through the ranks, correct?
Yes, I did, because I was working at a higher rate.
In fact, you were promoted to a full-time position as a product development engineer shortly after you had arrived.
Yes.
Only after 3 months of being an intern at Lush, correct?
Yes.
Now, in September of 2003, like you said, your team conducted another in-house experiment, correct?
Yes.
To test whether Drufo was potentially carcinogenic in humans.
Yes.
And Ms. Durst, you read this report? Correct?
Yes.
Ms. Durst, this report was inconclusive, correct?
Yes, it was.
And you, part of the team that tested the safety of Drufo, never conducted another study on the health effects in humans.
We didn't get there. It was obviously it was obvious that our statistics and our distribution was lower than what was required by law, but we did not get to conduct a second study at the time, or third study, excuse me.
Ms. Durst, not in the whole time that you worked at Lush, you never conducted another study. After
Well, this was a team job, not just a me job.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. And did you know if Blake knew about any of these conclusions, the inconclusive conclusions reached by the—
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Walker?
Your Honor, it is the witness's rationally based perception that Blake Duncourt, the CEO of the company that she was working at, would know about the conclusions in a report.
If I may, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
I do not believe that my witness, even based off of her rationally based perception, can testify to the ongoings of what Blake Doncourt was thinking about. It's not anything based off what he said or anything based off of his actions, but she's rather asking for my witness to know the innermost thoughts of Mr. Doncourt's brain, and that, Your Honor, is speculation.
What was the question again?
Blake did not know about any of these conclusions reached by these scientists.
The objection is sustained.
Mr. Isn't it true that you did not ensure that your superiors knew of any of these possibilities?
Again, this was a team job, not just a me job.
Right. I would like to move on and talk about how your career ended with Lush. All of a sudden, you received lots of criticism from your supervisors and senior members.
Yes.
You were getting poor performance reviews.
Yes.
The quality of your work was heavily criticized.
Yes.
And these poor performance reviews kept coming for months.
Yes.
Up until 2005, when you confronted Ms. Duncourt.
Yes.
You asked her to talk with your supervisor, Jerry, correct?
Yes, I did.
But Ms. Duncourt refused.
Yeah, but also Ms. Doncourt was in a toxic relationship and she was going through divorce. So she was also heavily distracted with her family life.
Thank you, Ms. Sturz. Ms. Duncourt specifically said to grow up and do your job.
Yes.
And Ms. Sturz, you felt betrayed.
Yeah, I did. I didn't think that Doncourt was going to betray me like that.
By someone who felt like family to you.
Yes.
So you decided to search for a new job.
Well, yes, if I knew I was about to get fired and I was getting treated poorly at this job, it's just the natural thing to do is to find a better job to where I'm getting treated better and still making money.
And so you turned to Lush Fertilizer's biggest competitor and, would you say, rival, Terra's Greenery, correct?
Well, I think it's pretty smart, just considering that I had this experience previously at a fertilizer manufacturer and I went to school for some of this stuff. So I think it was just like that. And I don't think it was not intentional to just go for their competitor.
Thank you, Ms. Sturz. But you said that it was a great way to get Blake's goat, correct?
Yeah, it was. It was the heat of the moment.
Thank you, Ms. Sturz. And isn't it true that Terra's Greenery is about to release a new fertilizer you claim will rival Lush?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Sturz. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Ms. Inks?
A brief redirect, if I may, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Misters, could you tell us more about your time working at Lush Fertilizer? Well, a lot of it, I was working with the team. And then as the company began to fall apart, it was mostly correlation to Blake's divorce. And how do you know about the personal life of Blake Doncourt? Well, he was like the family I never had, as I previously stated. His son and I were friends all through high school and even through college. We went to ASU together. And what effect did it have on you when you did end up leaving? Well, obviously it was sad, but also it was a good start. It was a good new start. And then moving to work at Terra's Greenery, how did that affect you? It affected me positively. Obviously, I wasn't in a hostile work environment and I was working around the same matters. And are you proud of the work that you do at Terra's Greenery? Yes. And no further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Walker, any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Durst. You are excused. And who will be the plaintiff's next witness?
Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to call Dakota Weers to the stand.
Weirs? Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, Your Honor.
You can proceed, Mr. Dahman.
Good afternoon. Please state your name and your last for the record.
Dakota Weirs, Weirs.
And approximately how old are you?
20 years old.
Now, today you brought this lawsuit to court. Is that right?
I did, yes.
Why are you suing Lush Fertilizer Incorporated?
I was recently diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and I believe the sole cause of my diagnosis was from the use of Lush's fertilizer.
So I'd like to talk about your involvement with Lush Fertilizer. When did you first interact with Lush Fertilizer and its products?
Around the age of 14, since I started working for this landscaping company called Haven. There at my job, we use a variety of different fertilizers that included Lush.
And how long did you work for Haven Landscaping?
I worked at Havens for about 4 years.
And during those 4 years, how often did you use Lush Fertilizer as a part of your job?
Well, I would use Lush fertilizers when I was working primarily, since my job was to spread seed and then apply the fertilizer.
Now, I'd like to go back to my earlier question on why you were suing Lush. Why do you believe Lush is the cause of your diagnosis?
I believe Lush caused my non-Hodgkin because of this chemical ingredient found in its fertilizer called Drufo.
Objection.
What's the objection?
701.
Which is?
Which is improper lay testimony, Your Honor.
Improper lay opinion?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Dahman?
Pursuant to 701, I believe this is based off my witnesses' rationally based perception, which I will be asking a question on how they discovered this opinion for laying further foundation. I believe it's based off, since she has the diagnosis, she would know what would be causing her diagnosis, as she suffers from non-Hodgkin lymphoma. So I believe it's under 701 rationally based perception.
Objections overruled.
Would you like to finish your response?
I finished it. I believe Drufo, ingredient found in Lush's fertilizer, caused my diagnosis.
Now, when did you first learn about Lush Fertilizer's chemical Drufo?
I was watching this news segment about Lush's fertilizer and how it used Drufo, and that Drufo may cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Objection, best evidence.
Mr. Dahman?
Your Honor, I'm not entering the contents. It's being used as the effect on the listener for this witness, that it's not based on for the effect of the newscast. It's more about what the witness did with said newscast.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead.
Your Honor, under best evidence, an original writing, recording, or photograph is required in order to prove its contents. So I am not objecting under hearsay and effect on the listener. I am objecting under the fact that the witness has just testified that this newscast showed that there was a connection between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and this testimony is inadmissible under best evidence because the newscast is not with us in court today.
Your Honor, if I may.
Go ahead.
I'm entering this newscast for the purpose of the content. I'm entering it for the purpose of the effect on the listener. I'm not using it for what it said. It could matter more or less what the newscast said. It's more based on what the witness did with said newscast.
Okay. Objections overruled.
Now, after you heard about the news with Drufo, what did you do?
I contacted my boss at Havens and asked him if we use the product Lush fertilizer and if he could send me a picture of the old packaging.
Now, would you recognize that packaging if I showed it to you today?
Indeed, I would.
Your Honor, I'm going to have my co-counsel screen share what has been marked as Exhibit 1 at this time.
Go ahead.
Now, is this the label that you recognize, Ms. Weirs?
Yes, that's the label of Lush's fertilizer.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of the label that you used at the time at Haven Landscaping?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I move to enter Exhibit 1 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, so Exhibit 1 will be admitted.
Move to publish to the jury.
Permission granted. Go ahead and publish.
Ms. Weers, what were your concerns with Lush Fertilizer's product label?
How it really didn't include a warning and the potential of causing, I guess, issues for the user.
Okay, thank you. Co-counsel, you may now take down the exhibit. So now I'd like to move into more of a more difficult topic for you, your non-Hodgkin lymphoma. When were you first diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
I was diagnosed around the age of 18 before my future attendance to Juilliard. It's been a rough 2 years.
And over those 2 years that you've been dealing with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, how has it impacted you?
Non-Hodgkin, it's been devastating. It tore my family apart. Nothing in my life's been the same. I've had bouts of depression. I can't work anymore. I can't volunteer. And I can't play the piano. This diagnosis has taken everything away from me.
I know this is a really difficult topic for you to discuss, but how has non-Hodgkin lymphoma taken everything away from you?
Well, it took away my ability to participate in a lot of activities, and specifically the one thing I like the most is the piano.
Now, why is the piano so important to you specifically?
The piano, it brings me joy, and it makes me feel like I'm with my grandfather again. My grandfather inspired me to start playing the piano, but since his passing, whenever I'm at the piano playing, it feels like he's sitting next to me again.
And how has non-Hodgkin lymphoma impacted your ability to play the piano?
Non-Hodgkin caused my rapid weight loss, my lymph nodes to swell, chest pain, and frequent chills, which just prevents me from being able to sit down and play. And since I can't play the piano, it even cost me my ability to attend Juilliard.
And since this is so important to you, how do you feel about losing the ability to play the piano?
Other than having my life be ruined, it feels like I'm losing my grandfather again. And I'm scared of what the future may hold for me.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Ms. Shapiro, cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Miss Weers. I want to begin by talking about your landscaping job. Now, you were only 14 years old when you began your job at Haven.
Yes, that's right.
And this job required you to work with a lot of different chemicals.
Yes, as we used a variety of fertilizers.
Yes. And now, Miss Weers, did you hear Dr. Rogers' testimony today?
I was present, yes.
So you heard her say that protective gear was not supplied to workers at Haven.
No, at Haven's, we weren't given any equipment to use.
Now, but Miss Weers, you did say that your boss always told you to cover your face while you were working with chemicals?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay move to strike.
Ms. Shapiro.
Your Honor, the statement that the boss at Haven made that the employees were always supposed to cover their faces while working with chemicals is being offered for the effect on the listener.
Objections overruled.
Would you like me to repeat the question, Ms. Weers?
Please, if you could.
So you did say that your boss always told you to cover your face when you were working with chemicals?
Yes, he did.
And you were technically supposed to always wear certain protective clothing?
He did, but due to the environment we were working out, for instance, outside, it was always hot.
Yes, I understand. This protective clothing could have included long sleeves,
Yes,
long pants,
yes,
and gloves.
yes. But
But
they
you-
weren't supplied to us as the workers.
Do you have long pants and long sleeves?
Yes,
But you did not follow these guidelines.
regretfully no.
And in part because your coworkers did not follow these guidelines either.
Yes, everyone, including me, didn't.
Okay, now let's talk about the labels on these lawn products that you were using. So you used Lush fertilizer along with several other fertilizers and lawn chemicals, correct?
I did.
And you believe that the Lush label pictured in Exhibit 1 does not sufficiently warn users.
No, it doesn't.
But this label clearly recommends customers to wear certain clothing and face masks.
It does.
And this is the same recommendation that your employer gave you.
Yes.
These are the same precautions that your coworkers did not follow.
Yes, that's right.
And these
None
are
of
the
us
same.
did.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. These are the same precautions that you ignored.
Yes, unfortunately.
Now, you believe that other products have warning labels that help customers take precautions.
Yes, as it includes further information on the dangers of its products.
But those labels are not with us in court today to compare to the Lush label.
No.
Let's talk about how you came to your own conclusions in this case. So you watched some news stories about Lush's use of Drufo.
Yes, and how through the news segment it mentioned how Drufo may cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
But you do not mention a specific news source.
No.
You found a Lush fertilizer label from France.
Yes, through research that to further, after I watched the news segment, I wanted to do some research to see how Drufo may cause my diagnosis.
Yes, but that original label is not with us in court today.
No.
Now, I want to talk about something that you said in your witness statement, Ms. Weirs. You said that non-Hodgkin lymphoma is caused by environmental factors.
Yes, as it's from environment, so not genetics.
So you and your twin Skylar did almost everything together growing up except for your landscaping job. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor, lacks foundation.
Ms. Shapiro?
Your Honor, I believe that it is within this witness's rationally based perception to testify to her experiences growing up with her twin.
Your Honor, if I may.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, opposing counsel has not laid foundation that my client has a sister, that they have a relationship with their sister. So I'd like that foundation to be laid on this cross-examination before she asks questions regarding said relationship.
The objection's overruled. I think the question was foundational and it's the way it was worded in the first instance. So go ahead, Ms. Shapiro.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to repeat the question, Ms. Weirs?
Please.
You and your twin Skylar did almost everything together growing up except for your landscaping job.
Yes, we pretty much did. The only difference is I went to do the landscaping job at Haven.
So Skylar did not experience similar environmental factors as you.
Yes, that's right.
Your coworkers, however, did experience similar environmental factors as you.
Yes.
It is fair to assume that other landscapers outside of Haven have experienced similar environmental factors as you.
That's right.
It is fair to assume that the products you used were also used by landscapers outside of Haven.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, you do not know if any of your coworkers have been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Not that I'm aware of.
You do not know about any specific case other than your own where Drufo causes non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
That's right. I'm not aware of any, but that's just my personal experience.
Ms. Weirs, thank you for answering my questions. I truly hope that your condition improves, and I wish you all the best in your future. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
Okay, Mr. Dahmen, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, I'd like to talk about something that was brought up on cross-examination with the lack of face masks and protective gear. Did your company ever provide such protective gear?
No, we weren't ever given any of these PPE gears.
Now, I also like to talk about your twin sibling Skylar Weirs and those environmental factors that were brought up on cross-examination. Could you explain what environmental factors you believe are different between you and your sister?
Since my twin, she didn't work in the landscaping, I did. I was exposed to different uses of chemical substances, including luscious fertilizer and the ingredient Drufo, while my twin didn't have these exposures.
Thank you, Honor. I have no further questions.
Any recross, Ms. Shapiro?
Briefly, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Weirs, do you ever mention in your written affidavit that your boss did not provide masks and protective gear?
As I believe I do. That these protective equipment weren't provided.
Ms. Weirs, is it your statement in court today that in your witness statement, you said that you were not provided with protective gear?
Yes.
But it is also your statement in court today that your boss always told you to wear protective gear.
That's right.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Anything further from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests.
Okay. Let's turn to the defendant. How would the defendants like to proceed, Ms. Shapiro?
Yes, Your Honor.
How would you like to proceed? Who will be your first witness?
Well, Your Honor, pursuant to mock trial 5.3.3, no non-evidentiary or dispositive motions may be made, but if the mock trial rules would have permitted them, the defense would have moved for a directed verdict. But instead, we will call our first witness.
Okay. And who's going to be conducting the direct of that witness?
I will be, Your Honor.
Okay. And who's that witness?
Blake Doncourt.
Doncourt? And I don't know who's going to be crossing. Okay, Ms. Inks. Okay. Okay, thank you. I know there's a little bit of a delay. All right, Ms. Shapiro, Ms. Doncourt, Ms. Shapiro, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Doncourt. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Hello, my name is Ms. Blake Doncourt. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a business person and passionate environmentalist.
Can you tell us more about your business?
Yes, I am the CEO of Lush Fertilizer Incorporated. We are a globally recognized brand for our innovative products and dedication to protecting our planet.
Now, what inspired you to start Lush Fertilizer Incorporated?
Well, way back in the day, I was walking around the Flatirons and I was astonished by the beauty that surrounded me and it inspired me to start Lush Fertilizer Incorporated.
Is there?
My apologies, I thought I heard.
I thought I heard something too. Did someone, Ms. Inks, did you object?
Yes, Your Honor, I objected on the grounds of relevance.
Overruled. Go ahead, Ms. Shapiro.
And I was astonished by the beauty that surrounded me. So I decided to start Lush Fertilizer in 2000. And what started as a small business suddenly grew into this empire.
Now, how does your business intersect with your passion for the environment?
Well, at Lush, we think with the environment at the forefront of our minds. That's why we dedicate 10% of all of our profits to charities that go to decrease the global nitrogen footprint.
Now, is this work paying off?
Well, I have won many awards, but even more than that, this work has been and always will be really close to my heart. I would say I have two main priorities in life, creating amazing products and protecting our planet.
Now, how do you ensure that Lush's products are safe?
Well, like I said, I'm a business person and I'm not a scientist. So I rely on my amazing scientific team at Lush Fertilizer to test all of our products and report the results back to me.
Now, can you go into a little bit more detail about what the chain of command looks like at Lush?
Yes, at Lush, I am the CEO. So I end up making all the final decisions about money matters and also deciding whether we need more testing on these products. But I rely on my employees to test all of our products and report back.
Your Honor, the defense asked for Exhibit 8 to be screen shared by our timekeeper.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Ms. Doncourt, do you recognize this document?
Yes, this is my 10-year amortization.
And is this a fair and accurate copy?
It is.
Your Honor, the defense moves to enter Exhibit 8 into evidence.
Ms. Hanks, any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Okay, Exhibit 8's admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Doncourt, how does this data pictured here in Exhibit 8 help you do your job?
This helps me analyze what is necessary for our company to do and how much our expenditure is. So this really helps me with the cost-benefit analysis that is necessary to my work at Lush Fertilizer.
Thank you. And timekeeper, you may stop screen sharing. Now, Ms. Doncourt, did you hear Carson Durst's testimony in court today?
I did.
Did she ever bring these concerns to you?
Not once.
What is your relationship like with Ms. Durst?
I look at Kirsten like my own daughter, or at least I used to. And that's why her decision to go work for Tara, our greatest rival, I mean, it's a little bit hard for me to reconcile with.
Now, did anyone ever report to you that Lush Fertilizer or any of Lush's ingredients were unsafe?
No. And I want to clarify that we're in the business of working with chemicals that are inherently toxic, but I was never alerted to anything that was particularly dangerous about any of Lush's products. I couldn't live with myself if I'd put anything on the market that was dangerous. We always took smart precautions.
What do you mean by smart precautions?
Well, as I said, we did plenty of testing, but we also include user recommendation labels that we expect our customers to follow.
Were there any possible precautions that you chose to not take?
I mean, I guess we could have baked the fertilizer.
And why didn't you?
I mean, if I'm honest, there was nothing that pointed to anything particularly dangerous in our products. Speaking from a business perspective, it would have been expensive to solve a problem that wasn't there to begin with. Basically, my cost-benefit analysis that I did showed that there was no reason to bake any of our products.
Now, Ms. Doncourt, what was your reaction to hearing about Dakota Weir's sickness?
I was shocked that there could even be an idea that Miss Weir's sickness was linked back to Drufo. But with that being said, I was heartbroken. I mean, I have a family of my own, and I don't know what we would do if one of us were in that situation. It's terrible.
Now, Ms. Doncourt, we are here today because Miss Weirs believes that her sickness is Lush's fault. What is your reaction to this accusation?
I can't emphasize this enough. I have no hard feelings towards Miss Weirs herself for any of this. With that being said, all of Lush's products are safe. We're not the villains here. I want justice for Miss Weirs just like everybody else, but not at the expense of the company that has worked so hard to make our planet a more beautiful place. The fact of the matter in this case is we need to separate the truth from the tragedy.
Thank you, Ms. Doncourt. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
Thanks, Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Doncourt, you are the CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
Yes, that's correct.
And Lush Fertilizer is a manufacturer of a chemical bonding agent known as Drufo?
That is correct.
Lush and your flagship product, Lush Fertilizer, contains Drufo.
That is correct, yes.
And without Drufo, you would lose your competitive edge.
No.
I'd now like to talk to you about your profits in relation to a process known as baking. Now, baking is something that companies do to remove carcinogens from their products.
Yes, if they're carcinogenic to begin with.
But you do not do it because it increases your product cost.
No.
And you demonstrated those costs in a table?
Yes, I did, but that's not the only reason we didn't bake it.
That you created for your company?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to screen share what has been marked as Exhibit 8.
Go ahead.
And this is the table that you made?
Yes, that is correct.
And this is the table that demonstrates your overall profit breakdown in regards to the baking process?
Yeah, it is.
Your Honor, permission to now take down what has been marked as Exhibit 8.
Go ahead. That's fine.
And based off of the evidence in your table, baking would not increase your cost by 100%, would it?
No.
Or even 25%?
It wouldn't. But to begin with, there was no danger in any of our products, so there would be no point to baking it.
In fact, it only increases your cost by 6% the first year.
That is correct.
And every year thereafter by 2%.
That is correct.
And isn't it true that baking doesn't reduce the risk of carcinogens by 25%?
I believe so. Yes, I'm not a scientist, but that is what my scientists have told me.
But in fact, reduces the risk of carcinogens by 100%.
Yes, that is correct. But there was a very minimal risk to begin with.
But you bake your product?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
But did you bake your product?
No, there was no reason to.
So statistically, you cannot guarantee that your product is 100% free of carcinogens.
There is no way when you're working with fertilizers to do that, truly.
And based off of the studies mentioned in court today, your product has been identified as having a causal link to cancer.
No, not yet. At least I believe that is disputed in this case.
Specifically, the cancer known as non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
No, that isn't correct.
And those studies mentioned earlier today were generated from within your own company.
Those studies were, yes, but there is no actual proof that there is a link between those.
In addition, another study from University of California, Berkeley, Professor Dr. Rogers was mentioned today in court defining a causal link between your product and non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Yes, the non-peer-reviewed study, that is correct.
And the plaintiff here today, Dakota Weirs, has non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Yes, that is correct.
Dakota Weirs, the plaintiff, utilized your product for 4 years.
Along with many other products, I'm sure, yes.
Prior to developing non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Yes, that is correct.
And experts in court today have testified to the risks of prolonged exposure to dangerous chemicals and their causal link to non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Yes, but there is not necessarily a link between Drufo and those chemicals.
But these risks could be eliminated by baking your product to ensure that at 100% that Lush Fertilizer and its bonding agent Drufo was rid of any carcinogenic component.
That is correct, but there was close to no risk to begin with.
But to you, this risk was too little in regard to the financial expenditure your company would face in baking your product.
If there was a reasonable risk, I would have baked our products.
But you do admit there was a risk.
There was a very minimal, close to zero risk.
And this risk would be eliminated if you chose to bake your product.
Yes, that is correct, but there was
But you still chose to take that risk.
That close to zero risk.
For 6% profit the first year.
Yes.
And 2% profit every year thereafter.
Yes, that is
Thank
correct.
you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Shapiro, any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor. Ms. Doncourt, have you ever been made aware of a reliable study that has shown that Drufo is carcinogenic?
Not once, no.
And has a study been shown in court today that has made you change your mind?
Absolutely not.
Thank you, Ms. Doncourt. Thank you, Your Honor. The defense does not have any further questions for this witness.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Doncourt. You're excused. Defense can call their next witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Ms. Skylar Weirs to the stand.
Ms. Weirs, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Carlton, you're on. Okay, so you can proceed, Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Weirs. Could you please introduce yourself for the record?
Of course. My name is Skylar Weirs. That is spelled Weirs. I am an investigative journalist, and I am also Dakota Weirs' twin sister.
And Ms. Weirs, could you describe your relationship with your twin?
Yes. I love Dakota very much, but based on the situation that happened when I decided to forego college for my writing career, Dad cut me off, and Dad is
Your Honor. Narrative.
Ms. Walker.
Your Honor, I'm simply laying foundation as to why Ms. Weirs is here today testifying and to dismay any bias.
Your Honor, if I may.
Go ahead.
Question called for her relationship with her twin, and now she's going into the financial prospects of her family and her father.
The objection sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Ms. Weirs, could you, again, I'm going to re-ask the question. Could you describe your relationship with your sibling?
Yes, I love Dakota very much, but we are not super close because of the situation of life.
And why are you here testifying against your own sibling today?
It's not a decision I made lightly, but based on all the research that I did for my articles, I cannot support the claim that Drufo caused my sister's cancer.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. Could you describe your role as an investigative journalist?
Yes. So as an investigative journalist, I basically am assigned a topic and I do basically every form of research that I can. I find things online, I'll read books, I'll find papers, I'll look at studies, I'll look at articles, all of which are on that topic, and then I condense it to 500 words and publish it for readers.
And can you elaborate on what types of research and articles you've constructed?
Yeah, so currently I work for The Rationalist, which is it's a magazine and it's also a society, but I work for the magazine part, which they give me topics focusing on stopping the spread of pseudoscience. So I've received articles that are focusing on like climate change or UFOs, and like most recently on GMOs and agriculture.
And what types of agriculture specifically?
Mostly agricultural technology and its industry. I'll often reference agritech, which is agriculture technology.
Ms. Weirs, can you name any specific GMOs or fertilizers that you've researched?
Most recently, I wrote a series of articles, and one of the main topics that I did focus on was Drufo and lush fertilizer.
And how long would you say you researched Drufo and other fertilizers?
So I spent about a year doing all of the research for that article, and then ended up writing it and getting it published.
So for this article, where did most of your research come from?
Everywhere, basically. So I initially started with the agriculture companies, and then from there I would look at the studies that were referenced, and I'd look at the articles, and I'd read papers on it. I looked at a wealth of like information that's held and maintained by the USDA, the NASDA, the IRAI, which is that's the United States Department of Agriculture, the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, and the International Agency for Research on Cancer.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. At this time, Your Honor, I would like to tender Skylar Weirs as an expert witness in the fields of modern agricultural technology and the agricultural technology industry.
Carlton?
Your Honor, if I may, a brief word here.
Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Ms. Weirs. You did not provide a CV to this court, correct?
I'm sorry, you like cut out. Can you say the middle part of your question again?
Of course. You did not provide a CV to this court, correct?
Oh, no, I did not.
And you are an investigative journalist?
Yes, I am.
You do not have a college degree?
No, I chose to forego college for investigative journalism.
And you have not provided any proof of having skill in modern agritech?
No, my knowledge is based on the research I've done.
You do not have any experience working in modern agritech?
No, I'm allergic to grass.
You do not have any training in the field of modern agritech?
No.
You do not have any formal education in modern agritech?
No, I just did my research for my articles.
And your knowledge came from not even a year of research?
Yes, my knowledge came from about a year of research.
And your knowledge base involves general knowledge as well as historical and statistical information, correct?
Yes, I would say that I probably have one of the most broadest understanding of Drufo and many other agriculture and their companies as anyone else.
Involving general knowledge?
Yes.
Your Honor, we would object. This witness has not demonstrated the requisite knowledge, training, experience, or education to be qualified as an expert in modern agritech according to Rule 702.
Ms. Walker?
Yes, Your Honor. According to Judge Staub's pretrial ruling, an expert witness must provide an understandable explanation of her qualifications and meet the criteria under 702, including knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education. Ms. Weirs has elicited that she has spent a considerable amount of time, about a year, researching agricultural technology and their companies by reviewing publications written by those companies and information obtained by the USDA and NASDA specifically. According to this pretrial ruling, this is sufficient enough to establish that Ms. Weirs has specialized knowledge and therefore may be tendered in the field of agricultural technology.
Your Honor, if I may.
Go ahead.
This witness has testified that their knowledge base only includes general knowledge, and that's equivalent to a lay witness.
Response, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
Like I just said, according to this pretrial ruling, Ms. Weirs does not have to state that she has specific specialized knowledge. The information maintained by the USDA and the NASDA, as she researched from, and her time spent researching these companies is sufficient enough to establish that Ms. Weirs has specialized knowledge, like I just said.
Okay. Given the pretrial ruling of Judge Staub, I'm going to admit Ms. Weirs as an expert in agricultural or agritech, modern agritech and agricultural technology. So she's admitted as an expert in those fields.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Okay, go ahead.
Now, Ms. Weirs, could you elaborate on some of the work specifically you do for the Rationalist?
Yes. So as I said, basically, while I work for the Rationalist, they will assign me an article. I do all of the research I can in a time frame, and then I write and publish that article for them. I'm technically a freelance writer, but right now I work for the Rationalist.
And Ms. Weirs, could you name any articles or types of articles that you've constructed?
Most recently, I constructed an entire section of articles on Drufo and other agriculture things. They're all research papers.
Ms. Weirs, what did you find?
Basically, I found that Drufo, so it only needs to be applied once or twice a year, and it makes it safer for the environment and people who use it.
Could you describe a little bit about how that works?
Yes. So basically, Drufo only needs to be applied once or twice a year because it has an incredibly significant and powerful bonding agent. It bonds the chemicals within the Lush fertilizer to the ground more effectively than any other fertilizer to date.
So could you elaborate on how this compares to other fertilizers?
Yes, other fertilizers, because of their less successful bonding rate, need to be applied 5 to 6 times a year in order to achieve the same optimum yield as Drufo with 1 to 2 times a year.
And Ms. Weirs, what would this mean?
Basically, it makes Drufo safer than other fertilizers.
And if you have not found any studies regarding Drufo's potential harm, what other chemicals have caught your attention?
Well, so in my research, I was doing some research on like cancer, and any links from fertilizer to cancer using the International Agency for Research on Cancer. And they labeled arsenic as a known carcinogen for humans and glyphosate as a possible carcinogen for humans.
And Ms. Weirs, based on all of the research that you've done and in your expert opinion, can you claim that Drufo is carcinogenic?
No, through all of the research I did, I found no proof, no article, no paper, no study that was created with any validity that had a causal link between Drufo and any form of cancer.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
Ms. Carlton?
Yes, Your Honor. Is it your testimony today that Drufo binds to the ground in which it's applied to?
No, Drufo is a bonding agent, so it binds to the chemicals of Lush fertilizer in order to keep them from being washed away as quickly.
Okay. You are Dakota's twin, correct?
Yes, I am.
You are an investigative journalist for The Rationalist magazine?
I am.
And you chose to forego college?
Yes, I had a very successful paper that I wrote.
And this was to the dismay of your family, correct?
Your Honor, I objected to relevance as to the question of foregoing college.
Your Honor, if I may, this witness has brought it up numerous times in the direct.
Yeah, objections overruled.
And this was to the dismay of your family, correct?
My mother was not happy, but my father was actively dismayed.
And this caused your father to cut you off financially, correct?
Yes, I was getting financial support from my family, and then my mother died, and that financial support stopped.
And you were getting a little help on your side from your family because of your gambling?
I was getting help on the side because I was working 2 jobs. I'm an investigative journalist. I also have a second job at Applebee's, and investigative journalism is not an incredibly lucrative field for me quite yet.
Even though you dropped out of college because you had a very successful paper?
Yes, I had one very successful paper and it was my passion, so I chose to do it.
However, your gambling put you in a hole that you haven't been able to climb out of yet.
Objection, Your Honor. 404, improper character evidence.
Your Honor,
Ms. Carlton?
This goes to her financial culpabilities and bias in the case, as well as the relationship with her family.
Response, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Ms. Weirs has not testified as to if she is receiving money from testifying here today, and this has no relevance as to why she is testifying and to her bias. She has not mentioned money once in her direct.
Your Honor, if I may.
Go ahead.
I've laid foundation that her family relationship is tumultuous because of money, and her money prospects goes into her bias and reason for testifying in the case against her twin sister.
Okay, I'm going to allow the testimony. So the objection's overruled.
Would you like me to restate the question?
Yes, please.
And this is because your gambling put you in a hole that you have not been able to climb out of yet?
That is correct. I made a mistake with a March Madness and I am currently in debt.
You said your writing now generates income, correct?
It does.
Yet you have to work as a part-time server to make ends meet?
Correct. Writing is not a super lucrative field for me quite yet.
You claim to have the gall to challenge major players in agriculture,
Yes, that is part of what I do.
and this includes prominent researchers.
Yes.
You said you have lost many job opportunities to this.
Yes,
You stand by your own research.
I do. I believe that the research that I did is true of all of the information that I was able to gather.
This consisted of reviewing publications issued by modern agritech companies.
That is where I started. However, I continued beyond that. I looked at the studies that were referenced in those articles, as well as I looked at outside sources.
To be clear, you only reviewed the research studies referenced in those publications.
Again, I looked at basically anything and everything I could think of. I basically used agriculture companies and their publications as a starting point. That is not the only research I did.
Other than the USDA and NASDA, you did not research any other publications outside of those provided by modern agritech companies, correct?
Well, no, I got an immense amount of research. I also went to the International Agency for Research on Cancer when I was specifically diving into the claim that Drufo causes cancer. I was very thorough in my research.
Is it your testimony today that outside of those organizations, you reviewed multiple other studies and research institutions?
As I said, I've referenced a multitude of different locations. I referenced the USDA, I referenced the NASDA, I've referenced the IARA, I've referenced the agriculture technology companies that I started my research, and I also referenced the fact that I do a ton of other research.
So it's your testimony today that you did other research outside of modern agritech companies, the NASDA, USDA, and the National Cancer Organization?
The International Agency for Research on Cancer. My testimony today matches my witness statement in the sense that I am telling you, as I wrote down, that I did a multitude of research that I spent over a year doing, and I had a jumping point of agriculture technology industry or companies, and also referenced the other departments and such.
So you referenced other departments outside of those?
Yes, the USDA, the NASDA, the IARA.
Is it your witness testimony that you went through any other publications outside of those organizations?
I'm confused by your question. I thought we've gone over this. Can you reword it maybe?
Of course. I'm sorry if I've been unclear. I'm asking if you went to any outside publications other than modern agritech companies, the NASDA, the USDA, and the International Research Organization for Cancer.
No, those were my main ones.
Okay. You doubt no one else has the overall perspective of modern agritech than you do, correct?
Correct.
This perspective was gained from almost a year of research, correct?
Yes.
You would never claim there are no risks from modern agritech products?
No, I would not. I think there are chemicals in all agriculture products. Pesticides are designed to kill unwanted organisms in grass and such.
Thank you. You would never, or nitrogen is known to contribute to various types of cancer, correct?
Yes.
And lush fertilizers' active ingredients include nitrogen?
Yes, it does.
And that is what Drufo bonds to?
Yes.
Virtually every commercial pesticide has several well-known carcinogens?
Yes.
And carcinogens do cause cancer, correct?
Yes.
And these carcinogens include nitrates?
Yes.
Moving on, the research on whether Drufo causes cancer are inconclusive at best, correct?
I found no link between the two. That is correct.
Are inconclusive at best, correct?
Correct. There's no link that I found.
Are you saying that there's no link or that the results are inconclusive?
I'm saying that in all of my research, I found no study, no article, no paper that had a link between Drufo and cancer.
And this was the research that you obtained from those modern agritech companies?
Yes, as well as the other as well as the other companies that I referenced.
You aren't aware of any study that established a causal link between Drufo and cancer?
Correct. And it's a causal link. I found no causal link between Drufo and cancer.
And this is the research that you did for less than a year?
That is the research that I did for about a year in order to write my articles as an investigative journalist.
Is it your testimony today that you researched for about a year?
Yes.
Prior to today, you wrote a statement for this case?
I did.
And you just wrote that statement by yourself?
I did.
You reviewed that statement?
Yes.
And it's signed by you?
Uh-huh.
And you signed that it was an accurate statement?
Yes.
And you signed that the statement included everything that you needed?
Yes. Everything relevant to this case.
Just to be clear, your testimony today is that you researched Drufo for about a year?
Yes.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that my opposing counsel is publishing what is marked as Skylar Weir's affidavit.
I'm sorry, your opposing counsel?
Co-counsel.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was confused. You can show the witness the statement. It's not being published to the jury yet.
All right, I'd like to direct you to line 10. In it, it reads, I spent almost a year reading and researching. This is your affidavit, correct?
Correct.
All right. Moving on, you and Dakota don't have the stereotypical twin relationship?
No. While we did almost everything together when we were younger, life did not keep us close.
And your father said he'd shoulder the cost of Dakota's medical treatment?
Yes, I think as he should.
And this was after he cut you off, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Despite this, you love Dakota?
I do.
And you truly wish that you could support her in this lawsuit?
Yes.
But you know from your own research that Lush fertilizer is safe?
Yes.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Any redirect, Ms. Walker?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Weirs. You are excused. Who would the defense like to call their next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Dr. Devin Williams to the stand. May I proceed?
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Williams.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Devin Williams. I lead the Toxicology Research and Development Labs at Lush Fertilizer.
And could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I'm a toxicologist by training, and I initially started working for Lush about 10 years ago. I've also been leading the labs for about 7 of my 10 years, and I'm the outgoing chair of my company's ethics committee.
And what do you do as a research toxicologist?
Well, upon my research, I use my work to better understand how biological systems respond to environmental interventions. Some examples of that include alcohol and neurochemical pathways, or inorganic compounds in agriculture enhancing organophosphorus products. Through my training and experience, I know how to research, analyze, and evaluate test results in order to determine the fate and effects of potentially toxic chemical agents through biomolecular and biochemical markers.
Could you tell us a little more?
Yes, basically, this means I know how to tell if a substance is going to harm the average human and how to neutralize any potential harm. Most of my work is data-driven. However, I'm often asked to postulate as to broader outcomes that can be derived from my data sets.
And how did you come to be a research toxicologist?
Well, I received my PhD from Colorado State University in Fort Collins, and I also did a postgraduate program in pharmacotoxicology at the University of Utah. I also hold these certifications in the states of Colorado, as well as New Mexico, Wyoming, and Utah.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Your Honor, I now tender Dr. Devin Williams as an expert in the fields of toxicology, research analysis, and biological systems.
Mr. Damon, any objection?
No, Your Honor, as long as this witness stays within the scope of their qualifications.
All right. Then Dr. Williams is admitted in the field of toxicology and what were the other?
Research analysis and biological systems.
Okay, thank you. She'll be admitted in those areas.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Dr. Williams, you mentioned that you work for Lush Fertilizer. What is your main role at the company?
Well, I was initially employed as a technician. However, I was later promoted to lead the labs, largely to oversee the environmental impacts of our products.
Could you tell us more about Lush's fertilizers?
Yes. Well, to start broadly, fertilizer actually enhances the growth of plants, either by adding nutrients or by enhancing the effectiveness of the soil by modifying its water retention and aeration. Specific to Lush fertilizer, the product perfectly straddles these two components while staying environmentally friendly due to the composition of DRUFO.
And what is DRUFO?
Well, in order to understand DRUFO, we must first understand that, in short, DRUFO protects against nitrate pollution. Basically, any unused nitrogen gets converted into nitrates by bacteria in the soil. Those nitrates then get carried off into streams and lakes due to rain and irrigation runoff.
And what happens after that?
Well, those nitrates then accumulate within these water sources. They create dense algae blooms, reducing the amount of oxygen in the water, and as a result, killing the fish and also becoming harmful to humans.
What's DRUFO's role in this process?
Well, what DRUFO does is it actually binds to the ingredients in the fertilizer to the grass or other plants that are being sprayed. That way, less fertilizer needs to be sprayed and less washes away into the soil. That way, the eutrophication process or the accumulation of those nitrates gets cut off at the very beginning.
And have there been any negative reactions to DRUFO?
Well, to my understanding, DRUFO has been banned in the EU. However, that is only specific to the European Union's nitrate directive.
And what does the European Union nitrate directive mean?
Well, it basically means that no new fertilizer can be used that contributes to more than the incidental nitrate accumulation in lab tests. Although DRUFO greatly reduces that accumulation under real-world conditions, there's still nitrogen in it, thus the ban.
And why didn't Lush choose to fight this European Union decision to ban DRUFO?
Well, in theory, Lush could have fought the EU decision. However, it was a brand new company back then with very limited resources. It just seemed easier to produce a line of products without DRUFO to be sold in countries that prohibit it.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I'd like to take a step back. The plaintiff claims that DRUFO causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. What are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, the use of DRUFO has not been correlated with a statistically significant increase in the incidence of non-Hodgkin's or any other cancer.
Could you expand on that?
Well, the way we answer this question is through statistics. We can look at the incidence rate for people who have used fertilizers with DRUFO and compare that to the incidence rate for people who have used fertilizers without DRUFO.
Could you elaborate on what else goes into these statistics?
Well, first you need to account for the random element. If you take a large group of people who have used fertilizers with DRUFO, some of them will just naturally develop non-Hodgkin's. And, that can be from, medical history, other environmental factors, or just by pure chance. We cannot account for that in the statistical increase in the chance of getting cancer from DRUFO. I would also like to add that, the larger the sample, the larger the amount of people in the sample that just have non-Hodgkin's. Not meaning that there's anything causing more non-Hodgkin's. It just means that there are more people in the sample.
Would you be able to condense your analysis into one or two sentences for us?
Well, the data that we analyzed all came in below normal confidence level, meaning all the data that we looked at was consistent with users of DRUFO fertilizers not having an elevated risk of non-Hodgkin's compared to other fertilizer users.
Now, Dr. Williams, you note that the risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is not higher in users of DRUFO versus users of any other fertilizer. Why do you make this choice?
We need to compare something like apples to apples here. In terms of fertilizer consumption, you can't compare something like farm laborers to gardeners. That'd be like comparing, apples to Toyotas, which is super dangerous in the scientific world.
What's the danger of comparing apples to Toyotas?
Well, farm laborers, gardeners, and the population that don't do either of those things typically have different lifestyles. Different lifestyles mean different environments, and different environments mean different environmental exposures. Basically, in order to conduct a proper study, you would need to compare something like, farm laborers who have used fertilizers with Drufo, and compare that to farm laborers who have used fertilizers without Drufo. That would be like your prime example of that apples to apples scenario.
Do you have any other thoughts on Dr. Rogers' study?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was referencing Dr. Rogers' study, and they conducted a study that actually compared those farm laborers to gardeners to the population that don't do either of those things. And again, like I said earlier, this is a great example of those apples to Toyotas.
Do you have any final thoughts?
I do, yes. First of all, the study was not peer-reviewed. It's vague, unreliable, and more importantly, it has not been replicated. If the study were conducted once more, there's a possibility that the results would be different. Science is based upon doing things over and over again in order to develop accuracy. Dr. Rogers has failed to do that.
Objection on our narrative.
Sustained. If you want to ask her the question, the last question was any final thoughts, which isn't really a direct question. It's calling for a narrative. The objection's untimely, but so actually I'm going to overrule the objection as untimely. It should have been made when the question was asked, but those types of questions are calling for narrative. So you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I re-ask the question?
Sure.
Do you have
the testimony's already in. So the answer is already in. If you want to ask her a different question or you need to clarify that question, you can. But the answer hasn't been stricken, and I overruled the objection as untimely.
Yes, Your Honor. If you could please continue, Dr. Williams.
Well, just as I was mentioning, I believe that Dr. Rogers' study was very vague and unreliable. And I believe that science is based upon doing things over and over again for accuracy. And I didn't see that in Dr. Rogers' study.
And what is your final opinion on this case?
Well, first of all, what is happening to Dakota is awful. I would never wish it upon anyone. But from my extensive research and experience working with these types of chemicals, I just don't see any statistical accuracies with Dr. Rogers' study, and therefore no valid evidence that Drufo causes cancer.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for the witness at this time.
Okay, Mr. Damon-Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Dr. Williams, you've worked with Lush Fertilizer Incorporated since the year 2010, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You were hired to keep Drufo products, quote, cost effective.
Cost effective and environmentally friendly.
Now, because of that environmental impact, fertilizers have a big environmental impact within local communities, correct?
Yes, it does. The great thing about fertilizers with the inclusion of Drufo is that it actually protects the environment and is a big environmental benefit.
Mainly with the terrible process of eutrophication.
Yes, that is correct.
However, Drufo was developed to reduce the effects of eutrophication.
Yes, it does. It helps to protect against that nitrogen buildup.
Because it bonds the ingredients of the fertilizer to the ground.
The fertilizer bonds to the grass or other plants that are being sprayed, yes.
So I'd like to move on to Lush's fertilizer's financial interest regarding your flagship product, Drufo. Now, you admit that you have a financial bias in this case, is that correct?
Well, I am employed by Lush. It is where my main source of income comes from. However, I'm mainly here in court today to testify to things I believe to be true about the chemical Drufo.
But you do admit you have a financial bias.
Yes, I do. I work for Lush.
I'd like to move deeper into that financial bias. Drufo is currently banned within the European Union, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
This is because Drufo has failed the European Union's nitrate directive.
Yes, it's because our product still has that little bit of nitrogen in it.
And it's because it failed the test that it formulates more than incidental nitrate accumulation.
Yes, within lab tests.
Now, you were present here when your company's expert witness, Skylar Weir, testified today,
Yes, that is correct.
where she said that nitrates are a known carcinogen.
Yes.
Now, regarding the effects, the test that the European Union completed, you have conducted an experiment refuting the European Union's claims.
Would you be able to restate your question?
The European Union conducted a test, but you have conducted your own experiment refuting the European Union's claims about the nitrate directive, correct?
I'm unfamiliar with the EU's testing. However, in Lush Fertilizer Labs, I've been conducting my own research on the chemicals that are currently in our products.
And you plan to submit your research to the European Union for reconsideration.
Yes, they are currently reconsidering.
But you believe that this lawsuit today could change the success of that reconsideration.
Possibly, yes.
Because if the court found that Drufo causes cancer, it would create a lot of bureaucratic roadblocks.
Well, I mean, we also want the EU to have the environmental benefits that come with having a fertilizer that contains Drufo. Yeah.
But do you think that if the court founded that Drufo causes cancer, it would create a lot of bureaucratic roadblocks within the European Union?
I mean, I suppose so. We're still distributing our product within the EU, regardless of containing Drufo.
Now, Dr. Williams, the success of Drufo within the European Union relies on the outcome of this case.
I suppose so.
And Lush Fertilizer, the product and company's financial success for Drufo relies on the outcome of this case.
Well, I'm mainly here to testify as a scientist. You know, I'm not on the business side of Lush Fertilizer. I don't believe I can testify to any of the financials of Lush.
But if the product could not be sold overseas, it would hurt the company's financials, correct?
Well, the product still is being distributed to the EU. It is with the exclusion of Drufo.
And the success of the product that you've worked on for 10 years, Drufo, relies on the outcome of this case in the European Union.
Again, we're still distributing products to the EU regardless of containing Drufo.
But specifically Drufo, the product you've worked on for 10 years, relies on the outcome of this case today.
I believe that, you know, from my testing and extensive experience working with these types of chemicals, I haven't seen any statistical accuracies of Drufo causing any carcinogens.
Your Honor, no further questions.
Ms. Blake, any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Does that conclude the defendant's case?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense rests.
Okay. So now we move to closing statements. Who's giving the closing statement for the plaintiff?
That would be me, Your Honor.
Are you ready to proceed?
Your Honor, before I begin, I'd like to save anything following my closing argument within that 5-minute time constraints for rebuttal following the defense's closing argument.
That's fine.
Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, Lush Fertilizer today has prioritized profit and subsequently produced the pain of our client, Dakota Weirs. Because of Lush Fertilizer's negligence, our client, Dakota Weirs, was contracted non-Hodgkin lymphoma due to the negligence to warn their consumers about the dangers of Drufo and Lush Fertilizer. So let's all step it back and go through all the evidence that you've heard today, suggesting that Lush Fertilizer prioritized profit to produce pain. First, you heard from our expert witness, Dr. Casey Rogers, an expert in chemistry as well as agriculture, as well as the effects of harmful pesticides. She testified that she completed a study about Drufo, that as a result of that study, found that Drufo causes non-Hodgkin lymphoma and other associated cancers 10 times more likely based on repeated daily use for Lush Fertilizer's expected users, gardeners and landscapers. You also heard that PPE is not traditionally supplied to landscapers as well as gardeners with landscaping companies. You also heard that Dakota Weirs' cancer, according to our expert, was caused by Lush Fertilizer because of repeated exposure during their job at Haven Landscaping. Then you heard from a former employee of Lush Fertilizer, Carson Durst, who testified that she raised objections to their boss, Jerry Langley, in routine meetings concerning Drufo itself and studies that suggested that Drufo was carcinogenic. Concerning those, when Jerry Langley heard those concerns, they were simply brushed under the rug. They were brushed under the rug because Lush Fertilizer wanted to prioritize profit, and subsequently, by brushing it under the rug, produced pain. Then you heard from our client, Dakota Weirs, who testified that they worked with Haven Landscaping for 4 years and noticed that the product that they used with Lush Fertilizer lacked appropriate warning labels. While it might have said user recommendations, it failed to instruct the user of possible harmful effects, such as cancer and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And because of Lush Fertilizer's negligence, Dakota Weirs lost everything. She lost her ability to play the piano. She lost her ability to participate in high school activities. She lost the ability to go to her dream school of Juilliard on a full ride scholarship. And it's all because of Lush Fertilizer's prioritizing of profit and subsequently produce pain for the consumers that they are supposed to take reasonable care to protect. And the defense wants you to look through the tragedy to see the truth. That tragedy prompts a search for the truth, and we agree with that. But that search for the truth shows that Lush Fertilizer prioritized profit and subsequently produced pain. You heard from Blake Doncourt, who testified that she knew the risk of their products, that their products could cause harm. Pursuant to jury instruction number 3, a reasonable care, you must, 1, make sure that if a product is potentially harmful, the company has 2, a duty to report those possible harmful effects to the consumer or a reasonable consumer. And simply put, they ignored the risks to prioritize 6% of profit and 2% afterwards. Then you heard from Dakota Weirs, Skylar Weirs, the twin of our client, who contradicted the amount of research that they did on the stand, saying that they had almost a year of research, but when confronted with her statement, it was less than a year. That difference really can impact the decisions that they make, and it goes to their credibility. Lastly, you heard from the other expert witness on the defense, Dr. Devin Williams, who testified about a financial bias and that the outcome of this case directly impacts the success of Lush Fertilizer. Simply put, all these witnesses are prioritizing profit and subsequently producing pain. Now, as the plaintiff, we bear the burden of proving to you by the preponderance of the evidence that Lush Fertilizer was negligent in their actions. And simply put, Lush Fertilizer prioritized profit and produced pain. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Looks like you have 30 seconds left on rebuttal if you choose to use it, Mr. Damon. And who's giving the closing argument for the defense? Ms. Blake?
I will be, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, Ms. Blake, you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tragedy often prompts a search for truth. The plaintiff is looking for answers in the wrong place. The defense is asking you, members of the jury, to separate the truth from the tragedy. The truth is that Lush Fertilizer Incorporated is not liable for the damages Dakota Weirs is facing. The plaintiff must prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Lush Fertilizer was negligent pursuant to jury instruction number 2. In order to do so, they must prove causation, duty to warn, breach of duty, and damages. The plaintiff has failed to prove all but one: damages. We are empathetic for Dakota and understand the impact that this cancer will have and has had on Dakota's life, but Drufo is not the cause. Let's start with causation. Pursuant to jury instruction number 2, the plaintiff must prove that Lush Fertilizer failed to exercise reasonable care to prevent an unreasonable risk or harm to persons who use that product. You first heard from Lush's CEO, Blake Doncourt, who talked about the extensive testing and research that went into Drufo before it was placed on the market. And you heard her discuss how baking is unnecessary since the product is already safe. You then heard from Skylar Weirs, who has spent years researching and investigating Drufo and has not found a single study that links Drufo to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. She talked about how fertilizers with Drufo only need to be sprayed 1 to 2 times a year, while other fertilizers need to be sprayed 5 to 6 times a year. And lastly, you heard her testify that Dakota Weirs is the only person to suggest a connection between non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and Drufo and bring it to court. And then you heard from Dr. Casey Rogers, who tried to convince you that her results suggest there's a correlation between exposure to Drufo and cancer. But you also heard from Dr. Devin Williams, who challenged Dr. Rogers' study and showed how it is more flawed than accurate. You heard Dr. Rogers talk about the report she had heard on the danger of Drufo, but failed to specify crucial details about those reports. You heard Dr. Rogers talk about her study, and yet she failed to specify crucial details about that study, such as the size of the groups or the amount of time she followed her subjects. Members of the jury, the very basis of Dr. Rogers' study hinges upon comparing two completely different things, apples to Toyotas. And ultimately, Dr. Rogers' study has not been peer-reviewed, has not been replicated, and thus proves nothing. In fact, you heard Dr. Williams testify to the safety of Drufo and how, overall, the use of Drufo has not been correlated with a statistically significant increase in the incidence of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or any other cancer. But let's move on to duty. First of all, in order to have duty, one must have causation, and Lush has already established that there is no carcinogenic risk to Drufo, and thus no causation. But even then, you heard Blake Doncourt discuss how, even if there were concerns about Drufo's safety, Carson Durst kept that information like a secret, while Miss Doncourt kept the integrity of her company like an oath. You heard about the user recommendation labels Lush puts on their fertilizers, warning users to wear long sleeves, long pants, and a mask. And yet you heard Dakota Weirs testify that she didn't do any of those things. There was no breach of duty from Lush. The only element of this case the plaintiff can prove is damages. And we understand and we wish Dakota Weirs all the best. But we have established that Drufo is not the cause. However, if you do find Drufo to be the cause, you must then consider the comparative negligence pursuant to jury instruction number 8, as Dakota Weirs failed to follow the instructions on Lush's recommendation labels on their products. Members of the jury, our job today was to separate the truth from the tragedy, show that Drufo is wrongfully at the heart of this case. You heard for yourself that Drufo is not carcinogenic and is therefore not the cause of Dakota Weirs' cancer or any other cancer. Find Lush Fertilizer Incorporated not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blake. Mr. Damon, you have 30 seconds if you reserve for rebuttal.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, concerning the defense's assertion that product was not carcinogenic, Lush Fertilizer's product contained nitrogen as well as nitrates. And as their expert witnesses both stated, nitrates and nitrogen are carcinogenic, which caused harm to our client, Dakota Weirs, and subsequently prioritized their profit over the well-being of our client. They are negligent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Damon. Thank you, counsel. Emma, are we at this point? Okay, so that concludes the trial. Thank you, everyone. We'll have the scoring judges complete the scoring panels complete their scoring and let me know when those have been submitted.
When the scoring panelists submit their score sheets, I'll get notice from the head courtroom and then you can dismiss.
Okay. Can I talk to the attorneys now?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Counsel, can you guys all please activate all the participants, you can turn on your cameras. The scoring panelists don't have to if they're in the middle of scoring. I just wanted to give us, while we have a few minutes, I wanted to give a little bit of feedback. First of all, it's not easy, is it? Hopefully you guys, I was very impressed with all of you. I think there are obviously, people spend a lot of years going to school to do this sort of stuff, and I'm impressed with the way that you folks handle yourself and the way you presented your case here. I know it's difficult to do, and it's sort of a unique circumstance by doing it by Zoom, but I do hearings every day by Zoom, and I thought you all conducted yourself very well. I'm not going to go through each individual. I wanted to point out a couple of things that I was impressed with and things that I think that will help you folks moving forward. Like I said, I think you all had a very good command of the case and the way that you handled it. I thought your questioning was good and to the point for the most part. I think sometimes you kind of don't get married to your script. When the witness says something that you don't expect, sometimes you need to address that. What I think is most effective as an attorney in asking questions and in giving and speaking to the court, speaking to the jury, is a conversational style. And there were times when some of you were giving, and I'm not going to point individuals out, but in some opening statements and some of the closing statements were a little more conversational than others, and then it would switch. But because I noticed, for example, I believe Miss Carlton, your opening statement was good. I thought that was your opening statement. I thought your opening statement was really good, but then when you started to question the witness, you became a little less conversational, and you just maintain that conversational tone, and it communicates that to the jury better. Because really, what you're doing is have a conversation with the witness in front of the jury. So that's sort of how I view that. I did want to point out one thing that, and I think I threw Miss Blake for a loop, and I wasn't intending to do that. But when you ask questions, if you open up a question with "tell me more" or "any final thoughts," you're going to get an objection for calling for a narrative. What you really wanted to ask was, do you have any criticisms of Dr. Rogers' study? And instead you just said, what else do you think? So be a little bit more specific on that type of question. And you got the information you need to get in, you know what you're getting to ask, but just asking the witness to tell me what you think is going to draw an objection. Does that make sense? So otherwise, I thought I was impressed. I thought everyone did a very nice job. Just be careful with language in front of a jury, and not I don't mean that by cursing, but just sort of the things that you say. For example, there was one question, and I don't remember who asked it, of the witness's twin from their own counsel said, "Why are you testifying against your sister here?" You're already setting them up as you're setting them up for fall there. Just say, "Why are you here to testify?" Don't say testifying against your sister, because then you're already, let the other side make that accusation. Otherwise, because you sort of undermine your witness saying you're here to testify against, you just say, "I'm not here to testify against my sister. I'm here to testify as to what I found." So those were sort of the things that I saw. And just so you folks know, I would never admit Skylar Weirs is an expert in this case, but that was sort of, I couldn't really exclude her here because Morgan had prepared so diligently for her testimony. But otherwise, I thought everybody did a really nice job, and I was very impressed with the work you put in. You can tell you put a lot of hard work into it. So congratulations on that. I thought you did a nice job. I don't know if any of the panelists have any comments or anything, or if any of you have any questions, I'll answer them if it's appropriate.
I would echo the comments of the judge. I think you guys were incredibly well prepared today, did a fantastic job, which I guess is to be expected at the state level. But, I've judged several rounds of this, and you guys were by far and away both the best that I have seen. So I wish you all the luck in future rounds. But I think the judge took my comment, which was the conversational questioning was more persuasive and easier to follow. And it's hard because you've got your list of questions and you're ready to go with it. But, the more you can kind of develop that repertoire with the witness, it's just so much more persuasive. And the other thing, and it's really, really hard to do in court in real life too, is listen to what the answers are, because you know what you're expecting them to say and they don't always say it. But I have to say, I agree. My favorite part of the whole day was listening to you debate whether Skylar was a expert. I haven't heard that in any of the other rounds, and that was the first thing I thought when I saw this: is how is a 22-year-old who read stuff an expert? So it was a fun debate from both sides to listen to. I thought it was a good objection and a good response. So great job, and good luck in the future rounds.
I'll echo what was already said by Ms. Eyes and our judge today. Mock trial has come a long way from when it started here in Colorado. I was involved in it the first year it came to Colorado, and I can tell you, you guys would have wiped the floor with us. I know some attorneys you would wipe the floor with too, because you are incredibly well prepared. And, I could kind of see the look on a couple faces when it came to objections, and maybe, chiding yourselves for not getting up there fast enough to make that objection, before a bell got rung or something. You know what? Attorneys who do this get paid for a living to do it have difficulty always making that. And yeah, it's difficult once a bell gets rung to, ask for it to no longer, for something that once it gets in, to try to keep it, keep it out after that point. It really is. But it's still so important to actually, grab that bull by the horn, stand up and make that objection. It's so important. And it was really good that you went through with that. And I'm going to say, especially for the, all the attorneys, all the witnesses were fantastic. You could really tell you put, your heart and soul into this. But I was going to especially point out that the cross, we had our attorney who had to probably do the most unfun cross of Dakota Weir's. You handled that so well, because you have to understand, in real life, the jury already is not going to like you. You're crossing someone with cancer. And you handled that so beautifully. I know attorneys in real life who wouldn't have handled with the level of, it's a hard balance to strike, the going hard and tempered by compassion. And I think everyone displayed such a high understanding of the case, and then also of the understanding that you were dealing with a cancer patient. So bravo to everyone.
Well, I'll just jump in too. I agree with everything that's been said. One other thing that I would add is that neither side really made all the use of the exhibits that you could have used. But you did bring up two of them. One of them was the label, and the label has on it the instructions or the suggestions with regard to use. And both sides could have been making your arguments using that exhibit. And the main advantage to using the exhibit is that when the jurors leave the courtroom, they still have the exhibit. They will know, they might disagree about which of the witnesses they're going to believe, but they've got an exhibit that they've got to deal with. And so you want to make sure you incorporate those into your presentation of the evidence, and then correspondingly into your closing as well. But I agree, both sides did really wonderfully well. You're well on your way to careers in law if that's what you want. And certainly you've got more experience than many associates coming into law firms at this point. So congratulations to all of you.
Deanna?
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna thank you to all of you participants for doing this. It takes a lot of mental fortitude to get to this level. Please take this, just actually getting here, as an absolute win, because I promise you it's infinitely more difficult than you think it is right now. So give yourself credit for getting here at all. It's always a very difficult thing to maintain this level of heightened mental acuity once you get up in here, and it's also very easy to kind of slip and maybe forget some of the things that you would have been hyper attuned to earlier in the year during the competition rounds. So very nicely done. I am going to say a couple things to just a couple of the individuals, and don't take this to mean that I don't think that anybody else did anything fantastic. I'm just simply going to talk about a couple excellent examples of things that I wish I could get my attorneys to do. And I have been staff. I'm a paralegal. I specialize in civil litigation, and I am thrilled to see a civil litigation case come up. And I promise you, I wish I could get my attorneys to pay as much attention to how they address the witnesses, to how they present their exhibits, and also tone. Tone. Yes, let's see. First one, Mary, you played Carson Durst. That quip that you came back with, it was a team job, not a me job. That was fantastic. That was absolutely fantastic. I don't know, and I honestly don't care if someone gave you that line, but it was perfect. And especially the very natural way that it rolled off your tongue. Fantastic. Keep that up. And please continue in mock trial because you're a fantastic actor. Or, take that and use it in the rest of your career, whatever it may be, especially if it's in the legal profession. Let's see. Will, when you were on direct, when you were being questioned about your evidence rule, and you came back and you said, in response to the objection, you said, "No, I'm offering it for its effect on the listener," but then you further articulated, this is the part that most attorneys forget, you further articulated that you were proffering it because you wanted to point out that the listener did something with what they heard. Not just, you didn't just stop at, "Oh yes, I'm proffering it for its effect on the listener," right? Literally saying they did something with it after they heard it. Most attorneys don't do that, and I think it's a loss. I think it's their loss, and so very nicely done with that. For Dakota, I apologize, I'm probably going to mangle your last name, Ms. Nguyen. It would have been perfect if you could have managed an actual tear, but very nice job getting extremely emotional. Keep that up. Very good work. Let me think. And then back to the attorneys for closing. Ms. Blake, I believe. Very nicely done. Especially when you were talking and setting your theme for close, looking for answers in the wrong place and distinguishing truth from tragedy. That was absolutely fantastic. And before I forget, Win, Blake, I believe. Yes, that was probably one of the most stellar performances by a corporate owner that I have ever had the pleasure to see, having done a lot of basically PI cases. I wish that my witnesses would have come off nearly as convincing as you did. So thank you. Thank you so much for doing all of this, and especially the part where you were talking about how you were heartbroken. That was actually convincing. Very nicely done. But thank you to all of you. We really appreciate your time. Please continue in this. You've all done so, so well. And thank your back team for supporting you in this, because they have put in just as much effort as you have. And you know, your parents, your family, friends, loved ones, your back team, those people, thank them for us too, because without them you wouldn't be here. But you are here, and there's a reason you're here, and it shows. So thank you for doing this.
Well, I don't know if we're, I want to, and now having heard a couple of those, I want to give you guys, and I'm not going to comment on anything specific with sort of the evidence in the case, because you guys are still in the competition. And I don't think that's my role, is to tell you how I would do things differently, sort of substantively. But I think Mr. Wright made a very good point with your exhibits. Don't be afraid to leave that exhibit on the screen when you are asking a witness a question about it. Because the exhibit 8 was admitted, and the plaintiff's whole case here is you're prioritizing profit, and you leave that up on the screen and walk. You know, granted, you have a limited set of time, and this is a mock trial, not a real trial. But in a real trial, somebody would be walked through that line by line. What is this? 2%. What does that amount to? What's a human life worth? You save $250,000 and put people in danger. Right, that's the type of thing that you know, and the same thing with on the other side with the warning label, is leave that up there and said it told him to do this, it warned him about this. What would you do? Just because it doesn't say cancer on it doesn't mean it didn't tell you to wear this protective gear and that sort of stuff. So, like I said, you know, without going into it in too much detail, of, you know, that's your coach's job and your guys' job to figure out. But you know, I'm an administrative law judge with the state, and I hear probably 3 or 4 hearings a week, and I would be happy to have any of you in front of my court. So again, good job. You should be proud of yourselves, and good luck for the rest of the week or the weekend, everyone. And I don't know how, this is my first time doing this, so I was impressed. So if any of you have any questions, if it's appropriate, I would answer some. I don't know if you had some. But.
Thank you, everyone. The scoring panelists have submitted their score sheets, and you are ready to be dismissed if there's nothing left, Judge.
Nope, that's it. Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend. Good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.